What does it take to be worthy of standing next to Jesus? It, the Bible makes it clear that we're expected to follow him. And it's a good thing, it's an honor and a beautiful thing to follow the Christ. But what does it take to stand next to him? There are a few answers to this. One that I've been thinking about recently is, well, we have an example of people who have stood next to Jesus. But in particular moments, because there's a point in the Bible where Jesus and a few of his followers are at the top of a mountain, and suddenly he's transfigured into a being of pure light. Now, this is like stunning. But what's really intriguing is that two people appear with him, Moses and Elijah. It's a really curious thing, because heaven is full. It's not at capacity, but it is full. I don't know how many souls are up there, but how many people could have appeared next to Jesus but didn't? I mean, at this point, his earthly father, Saint Joseph, had probably passed on. So Saint Joseph could have appeared. Abraham could have appeared. King David. Like, there are so many interesting candidates for who could have appeared here. So who did appear? Moses and Elijah. That must mean something. And of course, it's the Bible. I'm sure it means hundreds of things. But one thing that's in my attention at the moment, is a helicopter going overhead. Just build the suspense for a moment. It's a beautiful day to be up in the sky. Absolutely stunning. I can't see a single cloud anyway. Okay, enough suspense building. So Moses and Elijah, both holy men, yes. Far from the only holy men in the Bible. So what's going on? Well, the stories that they're both famous for. I mean, Moses has a few. If you ask people, it's like, parting the Red Sea, getting the Ten Commandments, those are pretty good. The thing that is in my attention these days is how God wanted to perform a miracle to provide for the ancient Israelites. That miracle was, there's a rock. Moses would command the rock to open up and life-giving waters would gush forward. And it would be just this beautiful demonstration of God's power. Instead, Moses loses his temper in a moment of frustration. He strikes the rock, cracks the rock, and water gushes forward. Now, if you're desperately thirsty, that still feels like a miracle. But at the same time, it's like, well, was it, or did Moses just get lucky? Or did Moses know that rock contained water, so he cracked it open and the water gushes forward? There are materialist, there are secular explanations for that. But for the rock to open up at a word, and for water to gush forward, that's a proper miracle. There's no science to that. That's pure magic. And it's not the first time that Moses lost his temper like this, but his disobedience to the Lord cost him his chance at the promised land. He was able to see it, never able to step foot in it. Then Elijah. Well, Elijah is famous with good reason. He challenged 450 priests of Baal to a contest of divinity. You probably know the story. Each one had an offering of an animal on an altar, and whoever's would spontaneously burst into flames first was the winner. And the priests of Baal, they're chanting, they're harming themselves, they're doing all sorts of things, and Elijah is just doing nothing. He douses his altar in water, and then at some point he just asks God to intervene. Fire comes down from the heavens, incinerates the burnt offering, and the priests of Baal are all executed. It's a really cool story, but what stands out to me at the moment is what happens next. Because that's also pretty famous, but incredibly telling. Elijah has just won the most incredible victory in the name of the Lord. It's a righteous victory, but it's also incredible. He defeated 450 men in a contest of divine awesomeness. He was able to save his people. He was able to destroy this evil sect, to defeat these demon worshippers. If you or I did that, we'd be exalted. What an amazing thing. If I just did that just once, I could die happy. But of course, Elijah just wanders off into the wilderness and says that he's done. He's out. He's just ready to just roll over and die at any point. He's through with it. The first time I heard that, I thought it was a really curious reaction. So he's not excited, but he's also not just sort of humbly content. It's well, the victory wasn't mine, the victory was God's, I was just honored. No, he's despairing. He's okay, I guess I'm done now. And it took me a little while to figure out what that meant, and what he and Moses had in common. Moses losing his temper and striking the stone. Very bad thing. Disobedient to the Lord. If, as I personally believe, that the rock was Christ and that the waters were salvation, striking the rock is like punching Jesus. The dude needed to be punished for that, absolutely. But to disobey God like that, and in that way, speaks to me of Moses just being exhausted. Here he is, leading his people still, and yet again they're complaining and they're doubting, and they're oh, why aren't we walking on clouds and drinking dew out of golden cups? It's they're constantly complaining and they're constantly doubting and they're constantly turning away from the Lord. And Moses just has this really human moment where he just flips the table. He just loses it. And Elijah also has that similar reaction. He doesn't get angry, he gets despondent, but that comes from him reaching his limit. And I think that's part of the point. These two men, better than Abraham, better even than John the Baptist and St. Joseph, who Jesus personally loved and adored and respected. Moses and Elijah gave literally everything they had to the cause. They pushed themselves to the limit. They worked themselves to the limit. If you read the story of Elijah, it sounds like he's not really doing much. He's just sitting there for most of the time. That doesn't sound right though. Even though he's not doing much physically, mentally, he's having to hold himself together. Spiritually, he's keeping himself pure, ready to invoke God, and keeping himself in this state of devotion. He's being heckled and abused and threatened. There are physical fatigue in setting up the altar in particular ways. Anyone who's had to keep the faith, to keep optimistic, to put on a brave face, even when they're like terrified inside, knows how exhausting that is. And Elijah, being human, he probably had some doubts. And even if he didn't, he's surrounded by people who are doubting him. Keeping like stoic and brave during that situation, it takes a toll on a man. So Elijah achieving his victory and then just wandering off into a cave to just lay down and die, that's pretty on brand. That tracks baseball love. And it's the sort of thing that people do. And the evidence to back this up, like, once he had a nap, once he had a snack, he was fine. Like, the angels are wise enough to be like, look, you don't mean this. You're just exhausted to your limit. And it's a strange thing to be, like, that tired. Because we've all been, like, tired. We've all been, like, drained. We've all been exhausted. But to be exhausted to your limit, it breaks you in a way. Not permanently. You can recover from that. But just in that moment, it feels like your soul is out of your body. And then all that's left is the flesh and the weakness. But you get through it. Moses got through it. Was able to see the promised land at least. And gave his people one of the most incredible speeches in history. And Elijah got through it, because of course he did. And so I suspect that's partly what's going on here. Both of these men demonstrated what it means to follow Jesus. They demonstrated what it requires from you. Not just giving it a good hustle, not just like having a solid crack at it. It's not even getting good results. It's they gave everything they had. There was literally nothing left. If you'd asked Elijah to make like a campfire at that point, he would have just like stared blankly at you. Like, that's how exhausted he probably was. No wonder he wanted to just roll over and die. It's a bad place to be. But Elijah's story is the point. If you do give yourself that fully, yes, fully, in service to God, to Jesus, to the Lord, to the Holy Spirit, if you give yourself that fully in service to your fellow man in righteous cause, God will take care of you. Maybe an angel, literal or otherwise, will show up and it's like, here's some bread. I'll watch over you while you sleep. Maybe that's all it takes. Maybe that's what we're called to do. Maybe if we want to stand beside Jesus, to stand out even among holy men, it's not about achieving the greatest victory. It's about taking what you have, what God has loaned to you and bestowed upon you, and giving everything to the cause, holding nothing back, giving so much that you stumble, that you falter. Hopefully you don't falter in such a way that you're disobedient to the Lord. That was Moses' real mistake. Like losing his temper at his people who he's supposed to be leading. That's human. But to strike the rock in disobedience to the Lord, that's something else entirely. But to get to that point where it's understandable why he did that, that's your calling. That's what you need to emulate here. This is the lesson of the story. Of all the companies of heaven, Moses and Elijah stood beside Jesus, manifesting as pure light. If that's something that you want for yourself, if you want to stand beside Jesus, not just follow him, do what they did. Give everything that you have, and then give more. You might just find yourself standing on the mountain in front of some of the most holy men who have ever lived, and yet dazzling them with your radiance. So get to it. Peace be with you.